Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to 365 Live. My name is Gary, and I will be your host for tonight's live session. And tonight, as far as I'm aware, might be the last 365 Live for 2024. So I'm so glad that you're here this evening. So tonight's talk is going to be on Be Heard, Be Understood, and it is specially brought to you by our associate counselor at 365 Cancer Prevention Society, Mark Tan. All information shared at this event by the speaker and 365 CPS are for general information only and subject to changes, so do consult your doctor for personalized and detailed medical advice. So we are all here today to listen to our speaker, and I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speaker, who is an associate counselor of 365 Cancer Prevention Society. And armed with a Bachelor of Counseling from Singapore University of Social Sciences, he also conducts relaxation and mindfulness-related training workshops. So tonight, he'll be sharing with us more about communication styles and practical tips on effective communication. So please welcome our speaker for this evening, Mark Tan.
Hi, Gary.
Hey, good
Thanks
evening,
for
Mark.
having
How
me
are you?
here. I'm good. What about you?
I'm fantastic, and I'm actually looking forward to your session this evening because we are speaking every single day, and sometimes we may not communicate or convey things appropriately, or maybe it's received slightly differently. I'm guessing you're going to be touching on some of these points as well this evening.
Yes, definitely. So I'll be covering some tips that you all can bring home as a takeaway for this Christmas season. Yeah, so
Wonderful.
later on we'll be
Yeah.
doing we'll be having some activities also, like how to really become mindful of our communication.
Oh, wow, that sounds fantastic, and especially now in the Christmas season when there's family gatherings, and sometimes we might only see some of these family members, not very often through the year. So communication and conveying the right message is also very important. All right, so Mark, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, so thanks, Gary, for the introduction. Yeah, so everyone can see the slide, right? Okay, so thank you for taking this time tonight to tune in to this 365 Live Talk. So let me do a very brief introduction of myself again, right? So my name is Mark. I'm the Associate Counselor from 365 CPS. Yeah, so I provide psychological assessments and counseling consultations to our cancer fighting members, their family, and their caregivers. I also conduct psychoeducational workshops to our members as well as other mental health talks to the general public to promote mental health literacy and self-help in the community. So tonight we'll be covering on the topic of communication, right? Which every one of us here will be very interested to find out more, right? Yeah, so Christmas season is just around the corner. As we gather together with our loved ones to have quality time with them, right, and to celebrate the festive season, how can we communicate with them effectively to minimize misunderstanding and conflict? Let's find out more tonight on how to be heard and be understood during this Christmas season. So here's a very short highlight again before we start tonight's talk. All of the contents provided in this talk are for general information only, so kindly seek advice from the relevant professionals if you have any further queries on today's talk. So tonight we'll be focusing on communication. But first, we will first need to know what communication is about first. Then, why is effective communication so important? Then next, how can we then communicate effectively with our loved ones? And last of all, finally, some community resources shall be provided towards the end of this presentation, along with a very short time of Q&A. So feel free to post your questions in the comment section later on if you have more questions on what we discussed tonight. So what is communication? So let's have a very short discussion here right now. What is communication to you? Let us know by typing in the comment section at the bottom right, and I'll give everyone a few moments to do so. So there's no right or wrong answers since communication can be a rather subjective and abstract concept. So think about your everyday conversations with other people around you. How is your communication with others like? And what is communication to you through these daily conversations? Right, so I give you all a few more moments to maybe type your answers. Good evening, Christine. Yeah, so what is communication to you all? We all like to give a try? Like, what do you view communication as? Yeah, so for myself, I feel that communication itself, later we'll go into details, like maybe some definition of what communication is. Right. So I believe everyone will have your own definition of communication lah. Right. So maybe we just move on to maybe really have a look at what communication is. Okay. So do we know how to communicate then? Yeah. Like we all will have this question, right? Like it's such a strange question to ask. Do we know how to communicate? Right? Perhaps you may have this thinking. I talk to so many different people every day. Of course, I know how to communicate, right? This is like a redundant question. Yeah, so indeed, we communicate every day, but do we know how to communicate effectively with those around us so that our relationships can be enriched? So let us now see what entails effective communication. Okay, so good communication is not only about expressing yourself, but also actively listening and working to understand what the other person is saying. So it leaves all of the parties satisfied through the clear delivery of messages, leaving almost no room for misunderstandings and decreasing the potential for conflict. In situations where conflict does arise, actually effective communication helps to ensure that conflict is resolved in a very respectful manner, that no one is being hurt in the process. Right. So how a person communicates can either be a make or break factor in maintaining healthy relationships and healthy self-expression. Right. So this one is often a key point in determining whether our relationship can be maintained and there's a deeper connection with other people. Okay, so let us try out this activity, right? So if it is convenient for you, I'll give you some time to take a piece of paper if you have and a pencil or a pen, right? So maybe a few moments, right? Then I'm going to read out the following description and you'll try to draw out the picture as I read it out. Okay, so if let's say you don't have any paper or pencil around, right, you can just use your imagination and roughly form a picture in your mind of how this picture looks like. Then later I will reveal to you the intended picture, right? The picture that I have like created and formed. Right. So now let us, without further ado, I'll just read out this description, right? Then you will draw accordingly. Okay, so there is a Christmas tree with a star on top of it. It has no decorations on it. Below the tree are three boxes of red gifts. Okay, they come in different sizes. And there is a door to the left of the Christmas tree with its handle on the left side of the door. Okay, yeah, so I think like maybe y'all would wonder in your mind, right, like how it looks like. Maybe I repeat maybe two more times, right? Okay, so there is a Christmas tree with a star on top. It has no decorations on this Christmas tree. Below the tree are three boxes of red gifts. There is a door to the left of the Christmas tree with its handle to the left side of the door. Okay, I read one more time, the last time, in case anyone have missed it out. So there is a Christmas tree with a star on top of it. It has no decorations on it. Below the tree are three boxes of red gifts. There's a door to the left of the Christmas tree with a handle on the left side of the door. Okay, so you all can finish up the picture before we move on, before I review how it looks like. Okay, so maybe I'll review how it looks like, the picture. Okay, so this is how it looks like, right? A Christmas tree with a star on top with three presents below it, and a door to the left of the Christmas tree with a handle on the left side of the door. Right, so you may be wondering, right, what is actually the purpose and objective of this activity? Right. So some takeaway from this activity lah. Um, have you realized that what you have drawn or what you have imagined in your mind can be very different from what you see over here? Although the instructions is pretty simple lah, but the details behind this description is very different for everyone, right? The perception varies from person to person. Yeah, so very often in our daily lives, communication is the same way as well. Maybe we meant in a certain way, but then it may turn out very different to another person. Okay. Then the next point is, have you realized that I keep repeating? And maybe some of you, maybe the first time you'll get it already, you'll finish drawing already. Then you realize, hey, why are you repeating second and third time again? Why are you repeating over and over again? So many a times, right, we don't have this luxury. We only have one chance to listen. And repeating this information over and over again sometimes can be quite annoying, right? Quite like a nagging kind of situation. Right. So that is why effective communication is so important. So that we'll be able to really get a grasp of the entire situation, how it looks like, right? Yeah, so this is why effective communication is so important, right? So why should we communicate effectively then? Okay, so effective communication with our family members can help fight against social isolation and loneliness. Okay, so we shall now see some statistics and findings from the Straits Times regarding social isolation and loneliness among our Singaporeans. Okay, so the first article included a survey that highlighted the prevalence of social isolation and loneliness among Singapore seniors. Okay, so among those who feel socially isolated, right? This like regarding Singapore seniors, right? Those who feel socially isolated, it is very interesting to note that 4 out of 5 of them live with their families. Okay, so we often think that elderlies that live alone, they will feel more socially isolated or lonely. But then over here we see that it's really not the case. Majority they live with their families. So it's very interesting, right? This phenomenon. Okay, so often we might spend time with our elderly loved ones, but are we communicating effectively with them to form emotional connections with them? Okay, so this brings up a very important point: why communicating effectively with our elderly loved ones is so important. Okay, so also the survey found that most of these socially isolated elderlies see the best form of support comes from the family. Okay, so very likely this is attributed to the family-centric values that we as Asians possess lah. So after all, family is still the key lah. It's really the building block, right, of emotional connection. Okay, right. So next up, there is also another article, right? A poll done by Institute of Policy Studies between November and December 2023. So they found out that young people are more likely than other age groups to report higher levels of social isolation and loneliness. Okay? So we already see that like in among the elderly, it is already an issue, right? Social isolation and loneliness, but even more in our younger persons. Right. So that's why it's so important to have effective communication among our loved ones, regardless of age, right? Especially during this Christmas season when everyone is enjoying, right? And sometimes there can be that loneliness feeling, right? So it's important to have this effective communication to form deeper connections with our loved ones, to combat against social isolation and loneliness, right? Yeah, so let us have a look at some of the other benefits of effective communication. Yeah, so we see just now, right, from the articles that actually effective communication, it benefits those around us. Yeah, but other than that, actually it benefits us at a personal level, right? So let us have a closer look at how effective communication benefit us at a personal level. Okay, so the first one will be it benefits us by establishing trust with others, right? So just now we mentioned about how effective communication helps prevent isolation and loneliness, right? So this is done through forming emotional connections with other people, with our loved ones. Yeah, and these emotional connections are usually formed as a result of this established trust that we have with them, right? So by having effective communication, it's really not a one-way process. Okay, so while speaking with our loved one is an essential component of communication, listening is even more important to really build that connection. Otherwise, that one-way road, you will feel that you are just listening to a speaker, right? Rather than really connecting with them. So if you wish to forge stronger relationships with your loved ones, with other people, don't just talk to them, but also listen to what they are saying, being interested and curious to find out about them as a person. Okay, then next up will be that effective communication helps to prevent and resolve conflicts. When we communicate effectively, it leaves little room for misunderstandings. So it allows us to feel good about our relationships. It also makes other people feel connected to us when we interact with them. Okay, then next up, the third point is it reframes our thinking. Okay, yeah, so effective communication, right, allows us to forge more relationships and learn about multiple worldviews, right? Finding about how the world works. Lah. Okay, so when we are able to navigate the world and explore new and challenging situations, right, we will then get to meet new people, many of whom we might which might have like different opinions, different worldviews, different experiences, different knowledges, right? So by being into contact with them, this helps us to grow as a person and discover who we truly are. Yeah. Then last of all, it helps to increase receptiveness. Okay. So what does that mean? Right. So sometimes our spouse, our children, I'm not sure if let's say you experienced before, right? Sometimes when you communicate with them, maybe they may like comment, right? Hey, you're actually very naggy, leh, very I don't want to hear already. Because I hear many times already, right? Something like that. So by changing the way that we communicate with them, rather than repeating what we have already been doing, right? By changing this communication, it can increase their receptiveness towards our feedback or towards what we want them to hear, lah, like what we want them to receive from us. Okay, so now that we see the benefits of effective communication, what can we do to communicate effectively with other people? So we shall see six practical tips, right, that we can take away. Okay, so first tip is to become aware of our mode of communication. So there are three modes of communication, right? There's the parent, adult, and child. Okay, imagine these modes of communication as three parts of yourself. Okay, so we switch between these modes of communication according to the different circumstances. And there's no right or wrong, there's no best or like maybe not so good way of communication. Lah. All of the three actually comes up in different circumstances. Later, I will go into detail what each of the three actually entails, right? So the first one is parent, right? The parent style of communication. When we communicate in a parent mode, it will sound like a parent or an authority figure, right? So like, can you remember like when you were younger, right? When your parents, when they maybe sometimes they speak to you, right? How does it sound like? Right? So sometimes it involves like giving advice, right? Or setting rules, right? So like maybe you should do this, you shouldn't do that, right? You must finish this thing, maybe you should finish your homework, you shouldn't eat too much sweet, something like that, right? So this is a parent style of communication. Okay, so when we bring this parent style of communication into, like for example, caregiving. Okay, so for example, right, as caregivers of cancer fighters are still undergoing treatment, we might have their well-being in mind and might tell them things such as, I think you should avoid eating this food. Like, it's too salty, it's not going to be good for your health. You mustn't do the activity later, it's too strenuous, right? You may hurt yourself. So this is actually an example of a parent style of communication. Okay, so what about the adult style? When we communicate in an adult mode, the content of the communication usually involves like things like facts, maybe rationale, objectives, or even things that make sense. So it usually also seeks collaboration with other people, right? in finding a resolution to outcomes. So having that collaboration, sometimes negotiation and compromise, right, to really work on a certain situation to get a favorable outcome among the two parties lah. So maybe give an example, like instead of like in terms of like the cancer fighting context, right, the caregiving context. Okay, so instead of telling cancer fighting loved ones what to do, right, like in the parent style, an adult mode of communication would sound something like this. Okay, so I understand that you like to eat certain foods and do certain activities to enjoy yourself during our Christmas celebration. However, I'm also concerned about your health. Can we discuss together how we can let you enjoy your meals and activities, yet in a healthy way, right? So here we see that there is a collaboration, there's a compromise, right? On one hand, we want to enjoy, on another hand, also to really be healthy lah, in our options and choices. Yeah, so when we communicate in such a way, it's actually an example of an adult communication. And then third, we move on to the child mode of communication. As we communicate in a child mode, right, it actually involves our emotional and playful side sometimes, right? And it actually encompasses things like our feelings, spontaneity, etc. Mainly to do with our emotions. So it might lead us to feel and act as if we are a young child, right? So very often as when we are a child, right? Think back when we are a child, normally we will express our emotions very freely, right? Yeah. So through this form of communication, right? Actually, it has its benefits, but also it has its downside also, just like the parent style of communication. Okay, so let us have a look at the child mode of communication. What is an example lah? Okay, so giving an example, let's say during this Christmas season, okay, during this Christmas season, the caregiver, when he is in this child mode, right? Maybe he will say something like, "I'm so excited that Christmas is here. Let us enjoy this festive season together and just live in the moment and just enjoy and this time together, right, as a family." So this kind of communication, right? This excitement that embodies this communication, yeah, it helps to lighten up the mood of the cancer fighting loved ones. Maybe the cancer fighting loved one may be quite in a down mode, right? After knowing about cancer, right? The diagnosis of cancer. So when the loved ones actually like bring this mood up, right? It actually lightens the mood, right? So child mode of communication has its benefits too. Right. So later we will move into more details on how to switch. I mean, like different situation, how can we maximize these three mode of communications? Okay, so the second tip is to ask instead of ordering. Okay, so order means to command or to tell someone to do something, right? Right, like you should do this, you should do that. Like just now, the parent mode of communication. Yeah, so remember just now we talked about the example, right? About like for caregivers to tell the cancer fighting loved ones on what to do or what not to do. Okay, so by telling them what to do or what not to do is actually a form of ordering, right? Yeah. So rather than using a tone of ordering to do something, right, to for their benefit, right, we can choose to use an asking tone instead because this can sound less confrontational, lah. Yeah. So this is because no one like to be ordered around, right? Yeah, definitely no one's likes to be ordered around. And we can adopt a humble stance and get other people to do something for us in a polite tone. Okay, so look at the following statements here, right? How can we change this into an asking tone? Yeah, so let's have a look. This statement it says, I want you to cook dinner for Christmas Eve. Okay, I want you to cook dinner for Christmas Eve. Okay, so this sounds like an ordering tone, right? But if we use an asking tone, right, it will sound something like this. Lah. So, can you help to cook dinner for Christmas Eve for the family? Right? So, the latter actually sounds more polite. It sounds more willing to, I mean, the other party will receive it with more receptiveness. Yeah. So the next example, okay, for example, like maybe there's a gathering and maybe your loved one maybe like lost the phone right in the house and cannot find it. Okay, so maybe a way of ordering right will sound something like this. You should be less forgetful. Yeah, so the tone is very how to say more serious, more commanding, right? You should be less forgetful. Yeah, but when we use an asking tone, it can sound something like this. Can you try to remember it next time? Yeah, so a more nurturing tone, right? Rather than a commanding tone. Yeah, so this is something that we can practice in our daily lives. Yeah, in order to shift from this like ordering into something more less confrontational. Okay, so the third tip is to use I statements rather than you statements. So what are you and I statements, right? Okay, quite fascinating, right? The term. Yeah, so use statements begin with you, as you know, right? And may imply that the listener is responsible for something. So it shows no ownership of emotions. Rather, it can sound rather blaming or accusing and even assuming about the receiver. So more likely, this will make the other party or person feel defensive or even resentful, right? Of the way that you communicate over to the person. And he or she will be less likely to want to make peace if let's say it's a kind of conflict situation. Okay, rather if let's say we use an I statement, it helps us to uncover our real emotions and express how we really feel inside, right? But it also allows us to take responsibility for what we are thinking and feeling, right? Rather than not taking the responsibility. So it prevents us from blaming the other party as well and allows us to be assertive of our own feelings and emotions and needs also, but come across as less hostile and more compassionate. And very importantly, when we use these statements, the tone, the volume, and the pitch plays a very important part. Okay, so now let's have a look at an example of you statement and I statement. I think just now I did quite a lot of explanation, but now let us really have a deeper look at each of these statements and what each of them looks like. Okay, so maybe to give some example, huh? Yeah, so a context of this example, okay, let us look at this conversation between Alice and John. Okay, so imagine John works overtime usually, right, very frequently, and even has to work on Christmas Day. Okay, so Alice is not too happy about this arrangement because she feels neglected, that John is not spending enough time with her. Okay, so let us now see how Alice and John use statements to respond and how they can use I statements instead to bring across how they feel in a non-accusatory manner. Yeah. So let's have a look. So for Alice, she will say something like this, use statement. You are always working. Even on Christmas Day, you are also working. You don't care about me. Right? And if let's say we use I statement, it will sound something like this. Right? I feel neglected when you put work as a priority. So over here we see, right, I feel is okay, so this is the like a formula that we can take down, right? So I feel, you state the emotion, then you give the reason. When you, then the reason why you feel the emotion. Okay. Yeah. So this is you statement. So we see from the second sentence, right, the I statement, it feels more, you actually don't feel that like confrontational, right? Yeah. So even when we say this you statement, I mean I statement, right? When we say this I statement, we can use a softer tone as well in order to sound less confrontational and accusatory. Right. So let us now look at John's response. If let's say Alice says, you are always working, you don't care about me. Okay. So John probably will respond in this way, lah. You have never considered my feelings. You only know about your own feelings. Have you really cared about me? Right? So if let's say we see here is a you statement, how can we convert this you statement into an I statement then? Okay, so I feel disappointed when you fail to consider my feelings. Yeah. So this is another example that we can change the you statement into an I statement. Okay. So just to summarize, like these statements, how do we use the I statement? Okay. Whenever we feel a certain emotion, we have a certain need, yet we want to convey across to the other person in a less aggressive manner, in a less hostile manner. We can use this I statement, yeah, and here are some of the examples that you can consider. So I give you a few moments to maybe take a photo if you would like to adopt this approach. Okay, so moving on. Yeah, so if let's say later on you need to revisit this slide, I'll give you a few moments to do so also. But let's move on to the fourth tip. Okay, so the fourth tip is to use open-ended questions to find out about the needs of our loved ones. Okay, so earlier on, we mentioned an example of an adult mode of communication where caregivers discuss with the cancer fighting loved ones on how to come to a compromise between enjoying certain foods and activities and yet in a healthy way, right? Remember? Like during the PAC, the communication mode, we did mention that before, like just now. So coming back to that, okay, we can use open-ended questions to facilitate such a discussion, okay, to really find out about what exactly are they needing? What do they desire to have, right? Especially in the caregiving context. Yeah, rather than what we feel is the best for them, which they may have their own they may have their own way of feeling what is the best for them. Yeah. So it's very important to find out from them also, rather than us assuming about their needs. Okay, so these are some of the open-ended questions that we can ask them. Okay, so we start with what? Okay, so maybe to sound a bit less confrontational, right? We can add things like, can you tell me more about what you mean when you say da 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 da? Yeah. So can you tell me more about what you mean by when you say this thing or when you mention that? Yeah. So moving on. Okay. How? Right? How can I help you with maybe achieving some of your goals, some of your needs, some of your wants, right? Then could you tell me more about certain things, right? So it's very similar to what? And last of all, why? Right? But why we have to be very careful because it can sometimes sound very confrontational. Yeah. So there's an alternative to why. Yeah, but also to use very carefully, like how come, right? How did this happen? How come it happened? Yeah, is how can I assist you upon knowing the reason? Yeah. So the why is more of to explore, right? The other questions is more to find out how can I meet your need? Yeah. Yeah. So these are things that we can maybe take note also to help us to really form a deep connection with like our loved ones. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, the fifth tip. Right. So fifth tip is to be in the shoes of our loved ones. Right. So many a times how we see others from the way they behave may not be accurate, right? Just like an iceberg. Okay. Yeah. So often we only see the surface. We only see how big the iceberg is above the water. But we often neglect the iceberg that is being hidden underneath the water. Okay. So we know of the famous movie Titanic, right? Yeah, so um, the Titanic ship actually the sailor, I mean the captain actually miscalculated the size of the iceberg because they only see the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, so this is just a very quick analogy lah. Yeah, but this is to bring out the importance of really finding out more the deeper intentions behind the way that it's being communicated. Yeah, the deeper intentions behind the behaviors. Yeah, before coming to a conclusion too quickly. Okay, so giving an example, right? Okay, when our cancer fighting loved ones they display moodiness or even irritability mood symptoms, right? Have we tried to be in their shoes to really consider why they are maybe irritable or moody? Yeah, could it be that there are multiple side effects from the medications that they are taking that is making them really uncomfortable physically and this makes them irritable? Or could it be some of the functional losses that they are experiencing that led to the grief reactions? Or could it be fears or uncertainties about health and the future that is causing them to feel distressed? Yeah. So when we consider these possible different facets, we will then respond to their needs instead of reacting towards the behavior. Okay. Yeah. So this is really to allow us to connect with them at a deeper level. Yeah. Rather than just coming to a conclusion of certain things. Yeah. Really finding out the deeper emotions and the intentions is so important in the caregiving journey. Yeah. Okay, so tip number 6 is to really take note of our nonverbal cues. So just now the first 5 tips we already covered, right? Things that we should say, right? The words that we should use. Now let us see why nonverbal cues is also important. You also know that our body actually convey message, right? Many a times we think that communication is just all my words, the thing that I say. But have you considered how we say certain things rather than what we say, right? Okay, so here is to let us see why non-verbal cue is even more important than our words itself. So there's a study done by Dr. Albert Mehrabian on the elements of personal communication. So it's found that there are 55% of the communication is attributed to the body language. Okay, you see why it's more than half there. And 38% is attributed to the tone of voice that is being used. Only 7% of the words spoke, only 7% of communication is attributed to the spoken words. So we see actually what we say isn't really the main bulk of it. The main bulk is our non-verbal cues. Yeah. So that's why it is so important to really take note of how we are presenting ourselves, right? Our non-verbal cues. Yeah, because it really conveys more than words. Right. So what should we take note of our non-verbal cues, right? First of all, like all we all know, right? Eye contact is very important, right? To really establish a very deep connection with other people. And also our body language, right? Whether we are facing the person or we are tilting away, right? This can tell a lot. When we really tilt away, right, it can seem like it's very dismissive, very uninterested, right? And then there's the facial expression also, right? Maybe the things we say we don't it may not be in sync with how we really look like our facial expression. So it's so important that it's congruent, right? To really form that emotional connection with our loved ones. Okay, so just now we briefly mentioned lah, but now we'll go into like deeper details on how we can attend to our loved ones, especially like in the caregiving journey lah. Okay, so I think some of us may have heard of it before, the solar, right? SOLER. We go in sequence. So S is to sit squarely, meaning to face the person directly lah. Okay, and O is to adopt an open posture, not folding arms, not folding legs, right? Yeah, or not even maybe really slouching, right? Having an upright but relaxed posture. Then L is to lean forward, to really lean into what the other party is saying, right? Then E is to really make eye contact, as we have discussed just now. And then R is most importantly, right, of all of the five is to remain relaxed. Yeah. Because when you are not relaxed, when you are anxious, the other party can sense it, right? It's a very instinctive thing. Yeah, that we all will definitely have that feeling. Yeah. So we can consider this solar, yeah, in our daily lives, right? So especially when we are trying to attend to a person, this is even more important. Okay, so let us do a very quick summary. We are very near to the end of this talk, right? So the six tips, right? The first one is to be aware of our mode of communication. So we covered the parent, adult, child, right? Okay, then just to emphasize that there is no right or wrong as to which mode of communication we adopt, right? Most importantly is the mode of communication suitable for the situation, right? So we know maybe a very quick recap lah. So okay, so the parent, right? Parent is a more teaching role, a more instructing role. And then adult will be more of collaboration, facts, knowledge, objectives, right? And then child is more of emotions, right? How I feel, like really expressing the feelings out, right? So this is the PAC. Okay. Then next, asking instead of ordering. Okay, so ordering is like commanding the other person, right? Whereas asking is more like a more polite stance. And then using I statements instead of you statements, right? So you statement will be like things like you shouldn't do a certain things, right? But it doesn't really very effectively convey how we feel in an objective manner. So that's why we use the I statement, right, to really communicate our feelings objectively, right? So that we use both the child and the adult way of communication. Okay, so maybe just to recap, I statement will sound something like this, the formula. I feel, then like you put the emotion, then because, then you put the reason why, right? So I feel because why. Yeah, so this is the I statement. Okay, so fourth will be to use open-ended questions to find out more about their needs. Okay, right? So we covered things like what, how, could, right? And why. Okay, so why you have to use very carefully. Then the fifth one is to be in the shoes of other people, lah. Really consider various aspects, right? And not coming to conclusion, right? Rather to check in on them, yeah, and to find out what are their needs, right? So talking about the open-ended question earlier on. And then last of all is to take note of our body language. Yeah. So just now we mentioned, right, is that only 7% is our verbal cues. Sorry, from the words we say. And then 93% is really non-verbal, right? And including the tone also lah. Yeah. So we see that it's really a very huge percentage is non-verbal. Okay. And this is something that we can align so that what we say and how our body language can be synced lah, so that our loved ones can feel the genuine support from us. Okay, so we come to an end already, but let us end off with this quote. Okay, so communication sometimes is not what we first hear. Listen not just to the words, but listen for the reasons. Okay, so this quote is by Catherine Pucifer, right? So as we spend time with our loved ones this Christmas, let us lean in to listen to their needs, right? And make it a time of deep emotional connection with them, right? And really just enjoy the time together, being in the moment, living in the moment, right? So with that, there's some other resources that you can reach out to for professional help. Yeah, so here is our website, our 365 CPS website, and you may contact us through the email or through the telephone number. Yeah, or alternatively, you can scan this QR code. Yeah, I give you all a few moments to take a photo or to scan the QR code here. Okay, so we move on to the other resources in the community. Okay, so here's the 24 hours helpline by IMH and SOS, right? And there's also other helplines available also, like the Silver Ribbon Singapore. Okay, So I give you all a few moments also to take a few photos. Okay, so with that, we have come to the Q&A section. Does anyone have any questions relating to today's topic?
Hey, Mark. Thank you so
Hi,
much for
Gary.
sharing. And I hope everybody has learnt a thing or many things, at least six, because there were 6 tips, but even more about communication and, of course, how to just improve our relationships, whether it's caregiving or just general relationships and communication in general. So, yes, does anybody have any questions? But I do have a first question, Mark, which is, I actually wanted you to recall what you just said. I'm not sure if you remember. You mentioned, I love this thing about, the I versus the you statements and how I statements become a lot softer. But I was just trying to remember the word that you used. You said that if you were to define the difference between an I statement and a you statement, what is the difference again? How is it
Mm.
different?
Okay, so your statement is more of how you really like feel lah, but it's communicated in a way that it doesn't have the use of a personal pronoun. Yeah. So when there's no use of personal pronoun, there's no ownership of how you feel. So it will directly be uh the other party, what it didn't do or didn't do well. And so this actually distinguishes between you and I statements. Yeah. So I statement is really the ownership, like really like acknowledging that you feel a certain way and communicating to the other party and also allowing the other party to understand why you are feeling in a certain way. Whereas if you see a use statement, there's no that maybe there's no like communication of the rationale of why you feel that way.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's the difference.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Did anyone have any other questions as well? I actually just had something come up as you were replying that, and I remember you said also about these you statements that it can come quite like accusingly and that sort of thing. So, if somebody were to be, if we were on the receiving end, of a you statement or something that's, somebody who's a bit more aggressive or, demanding or accusing, how can we respond, or what can we do to either diffuse, make it less intense, or yeah, any tips
Mm.
on that?
Okay, so I think this is a different topic altogether from what we have discussed earlier on, lah, because this is more of conflict management, right? Because like earlier on, it's more of communicating. Yeah, but I mean, definitely some of the communication skills that we learn today can be applied. Yeah, but I think for that, when we meet with our conflict, right, it's very often that we would just react rather than really think through, yeah, before and process before we react, right, and behave, right. Yeah, so it's very important also when we are in that situation of conflict to consider the shoes of the other person, to really consider their perspective, lah, which we have covered earlier on, right? Yeah, to really consider their perspective. Yeah, so in that way it can help us to really, it brings down that tension and that emotion, that strong emotion. Yeah, because we are able to get where the other person is coming from. Yeah, and really get to the crux of the matter. Yeah, so only through that then we can really really how to say, come to a solution to the crux of the matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think it's very important because sometimes we do face, yeah, different
Yeah, but
styles
also,
of communication towards us. I mean, we can control, I guess, how we may
mm,
communicate to other people,
mm,
but we also need to be mindful of, like you said, our reaction if we are faced with some communication that may not be so
mm,
polite.
mm. Yeah, but
Um,
also, I mean, like, it definitely extends beyond today's talk, lah, in terms of this kind of conflict situation. Yeah, so there are some like skills that we can do to really calm ourselves down, to allow us more personal space to think about certain things. Yeah, things like practicing some mindfulness techniques, some breathing techniques to really calm ourselves down, to think through first before we respond. Yeah. So
Okay,
yeah. So if
wonderful.
let's say let's say this goes beyond, right, what I mean, this situation itself, it becomes even more tense, then maybe it may need some guidance lah from a professional. Yeah.
Mm, okay, sure. So I do see a question come in, and again, it's actually interesting. It's on the topic, the same topic of, you and I statements, and this is quite interesting. It said, "What if I said I feel that you need to?"
Okay.
So
Okay,
that's
right. Okay, so this is a very interesting statement, right? Because the intention and the objective of the I statement is not to point out the other party's fault. Yeah, it's more to convey in a less hostile manner how you feel. So when it says you need to, then it becomes, yeah, a parent style of communication. What we want is a more adult style of communication. Yeah, more objective, more really rational. Yeah, rather than the emotions, right? And rather about what you need to do or what you need not do.
yeah. So
Mm,
then, in that said, the three modes of communication that you were sharing earlier, the
mm,
parent, the adult, and the child. There are, I guess, pros and cons maybe for all of the styles. Is there such thing as a better or best style to be in, or is that dependent on the
okay.
situation?
So it really depends on the situation, right? Okay, so the thing is that for parent and child, right, there are different types of parent and child. Yeah, but to really keep it short, right, keep it easy, right? For parent wise, we can adopt a more nurturing style of parent style lah. Yeah, so nurturing would be things like okay, so for example, you should not do this, you should not do that, right? Yeah. So maybe a more parent style will be a more nurturing parent style will sound something like this lah. Yeah. So I mean like yeah. So for the nurturing parent style, it will sound something like yeah. You actually yeah. It seems that you do not you actually want a certain way, right? Yeah. But is it okay if let's say um you avoid eating or drinking certain diet, right? So more of like assuring, more nurturing kind of tone. Yeah.
And more
Even though
suggest
you were saying,
is
sorry,
it more
Gary?
is it more suggesting then, like just saying, "Hey, look," because you
Mm.
were sort of offering a solution or offering a possibility rather than telling. Is that what you mean?
Something like really nurturing lah, like making them feel that it's not really to yeah to really discourage them, bring them down. Yeah, but is it okay that we don't do a certain way? Yeah, so that is the nurturing part of the parent style of communication.
Okay.
Yeah. So other than that, there's also the child, right? There's also child, just now we mentioned, really expressing the emotion out. There's also the negative side also. Yeah, but the thing is that most importantly, at the end of the day, is that there's no right or wrong. Yeah, most importantly is really it is suitable for the situation. Yeah, so child, like just now we mentioned, right, emotions. Yeah, so expressing the emotion during this festive season can really lighten up the mood. But then on the other hand, if let's say we were to express the emotion in a very serious situation, and then suddenly you are very excited, but then actually the situation is quite serious, then it really goes against the situation lah. Yeah, so we may want to consider the whole picture before we decide which style to use.
Mm, yeah. Yes, definitely. Um, there was actually another. And by the way, feel free to ask any questions as well. We are still checking the chat, but as you were saying, Mark, earlier about my question, which was about sort of diffusing, or if we were on the receiving end of maybe some accusations or some things that are communication styles that is not so polite and kind. You did mention something about being in someone else's shoes, and of course that's like you said, it's probably out of the scope of tonight, where we've got to make sure that we're not reacting right away and maybe saying some things hostile back. But at the same time, if we're only thinking about other people's feelings, then what about our own feelings?
Yeah, so very importantly is that we also do have our own feelings and we need to acknowledge how we feel. Yeah. And how we put it across to the other party is also very important also. Yeah. So like just now, I think earlier on there's someone who mentioned, right, that I feel that you need to, right? Yeah. So we should avoid such a statement lah, but rather to express it in a more like objective manner, the I statement, right? So in that sense, when we express in such a way, then it lets the other person feel, know and understand how we are feeling, right? It cannot always be a one-way direction of interaction. Otherwise, it's not really effective communication, right? So expressing how we feel to the other party in a suitable manner is also a form of effective communication. Yeah, that is why it's so
Okay.
important, right? The two-way communication.
Okay. So I'm just curious uh, if we're talking about like trying to, be effective in our communication. I think you mentioned a little formula, and I just wanted to recap that more for everybody to really capture that, because as I read the comment just now, like I feel that you need to, that's not really expressing your emotions. That's, we that could easily be substituted as I think that you need to, because it seems more like a thinking statement rather than a feeling statement. So I think Mark mentioned before about having an emotion. So if we feel something, it shouldn't be we feel that you need to. It's more like I feel, and then you have to label the emotion, right? Is that right? And then after that, say why, which is the reason behind the emotion. I think that was a formula you used earlier. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the formula.
Yeah.
So the thing is that at the end of the day is the tone that we use also. It's not only about this statement, it's not just a formula. It's really that deep connection, yeah, that we want to bring home. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, wonderful. Are there any other questions? Anyone else would like to ask anything else? And by the way, Mark, are these all universal tips? When I say universal, I mean Singapore is a very multicultural. It's a diverse. I mean, there's people from all different sorts of countries, walks of life, belief systems, all that, living here in
Mm.
Singapore. So, does everything that you've shared today apply to everybody, whether we're communicating with, other nationalities or other um, people just in general, right? It might just not be just our family or just our colleagues or someone that we might know well, maybe.
Okay, I think Gary, you brought a very important point across, lah. I think this is the cultural aspect that we need to consider. Yeah, because very often this statement is more, it is very, how to say, it's very expressive. Okay, but our Asian context, it can be a bit more subtle in the way that we express our emotion, right? And the comfort of receiving the emotion as well. So when we use such a statement, maybe we have to do it more subtly, right? Considering the context, who we are expressing it towards, because even though it's Asian culture that we are in, right? But we because of globalization, there's a lot of different influences, and therefore there may be some Western influences among our society. Yeah, so it really varies among different individuals. Yeah, some individuals may adopt a more westernized approach or stance, whereas the others may not really be so emotionally expressive. So it really depends on who we are saying it towards. Yeah, not everyone is suitable for the I statement. If let's say the individual is maybe need more subtle way of communicating emotions, right? Then we may need to do it in another way, maybe not that expressive way, but still putting the point across to them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
Wonderful.
Maybe through the expression, the nonverbal cues, yeah, but
Mm.
at the same time stating the reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
Mm.
it's always the feeling and then the fact, right? The feeling and then the emotion. That's the
Yes,
formula,
correct.
and just expressing that in whatever way that obviously relates to you, that you feel comfortable with, and uh, and always trying to find, I guess, a collaborative result rather than yeah, the authoritative or hostile version.
Mm.
Is that right?
Yes, correct. I think in the end, it's really about harmony and really the peace among the relationship, which is very important, especially in this festive season. So this is just a very quick wrap up for this Christmas
Perfect.
season.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you, Mark, so much for spending your time with us this evening, and for
Thank you,
answering
Gary.
all of our questions. I will invite you to take your leave. So, everybody, if you're able to just thank Mark once again, thank you for sharing your insights this evening.
Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight.
Please do follow us on our social media pages. And once again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Gary. It's been a pleasure hosting you this year, and I look forward to seeing you guys next year, next session. Still, till then, sorry. Merry Christmas. Stay safe. Take care, and have a wonderful evening.